Recently, I've had not one, but 2 meetings with the Apex Legends developers, during which myself, other content creators and pro players have been able to ask them all our and your burning questions. From the simple ones like asking about Apex Legends 2 over to the hard ones where we grilled them about Apex's questionable rank system, the battle against cheaters, how insanely stupid the devotion is, and so much more. And I'm gonna summarize and take you through all of it, every last bit, so let's do it.
In months, y'all. I so red I can't see what's real. Roll me up a blunt.
So before I tell you all the good and not so good things about Apex from the devs, I gotta explain how these dev meetings work because I think that's important transparency. I've been involved in 2 of them now, which is kind of crazy because I'm the biggest complainer and very openly criticize things when they're not doing well. So who the hell let me in? But anyway, our first dev meeting, which was a few months ago all the way back in March, was absolutely fantastic. A bunch of devs all live streamed themselves in a Discord call where creators could then join that. We couldn't speak, but we had a text channel to ask our questions in, and we were able to ask those questions live and also ask follow-up questions on their answers. This was absolutely awesome and opened some really interesting and good dialogue and questions between the creators, pros, and devs. Whereas Dev Panel 2, or the second meeting, was a little bit different. While the setup was the same with them and us being in Discord, we had to pre-ask our questions days in advance, and the devs then answered those questions more in a PowerPoint presentation kind of style, where we sadly weren't able to ask follow-up questions. I definitely preferred the first version. I thought it was a lot better, but I do understand the second one making more sense from their point of view. It means they can choose the questions that suit the devs on the panel better to answer, they can't get blindsided, etc, etc. So I hope you enjoy me yapping because this video is a lot of me talking and explaining things to you. Let's do it. So first up, and what's most important probably to a lot of you guys, ranked and the rank system in Apex. Just before the start of season 25, when I had my last meeting with them about 3 months ago, they said that there were big rank system plus reward changes coming in season 25. To quote unquote, big changes, you'll be pleasantly surprised. Yet to fully see those or anything really of that sort, but maybe I misheard and they meant season 26, fingers crossed. When they spoke about ranked in general and its game modes, they said it's extremely hard to find a mode that fits all levels and playstyles. I did ask if they thought about or played around with the idea of having a slightly different rank system at the higher ranks compared to the medium and lower ranks, but they didn't get time to answer that question. They said they know ranks are inflated, especially around the diamond level, and they want to move the distribution back to gold, which in their words they state as the average rank in the game. There has been some internal discussions about adding a new rank in the future, but it's only very small discussions and nothing like that will be coming anytime soon. They'd rather focus on refining the current system they have with a few changes to try and make it more viable for all players and better as an overall rank system. Which plays into the fact of when I asked if they had thought about making changes for solo players, so for example less entry costs into games, they said no. And while there was a discussion about it, they would rather refine the current matchmaking system instead. And one of the things they mentioned for this was the way they queue solo players with teammates. They have a system which they're continually working on, which tries to pair solo players with other players of similar playstyles and players they've had fun or good games with in the past. Along with this, to make the solo queue experience better, they spoke about the matchmaking and the fact that squads, so when you're partied up in a 3 for example, your MMR is slightly inflated so that you go into higher tier lobbies compared to the solos whose MMR isn't inflated. To quote them, it removes a little bit of the disadvantage from the solo queue player. For ranked itself, they want to make placement more important, especially for scoring, but also want to ensure that there is a fine line between placement and KP, so that everyone's playstyle is viable and one isn't massively better than the other. With this, they specifically mentioned as they want to make placements more important, they also wanted to do it in a way where ratting didn't become a viable strat like it has been in the past. Cough cough, season 17 Masters. As for the competitiveness of Pred itself, so the higher ranks, they said they want to make this more competitive, which is a fantastic thing, and they spoke about wanting to reduce the idea of runaway Preds, where there's a few Apex Predators at the very top with thousands and thousands and thousands more RP than everyone else, and it's impossible to catch them. The amazing content creator Jayhawk asked about the potential of the ALGS dropships in ranked, as it would promote better mid, late games, and just be more healthy for the game in general, and they said they've looked into it, but there's nothing more come of it as of yet. That's largely everything spoken about for ranked itself, but still on the idea of ranked modes, and specifically more ranked modes being added to the game. When brought up, it was said, while a cool idea, it's something that's hard to do and won't be happening a lot, largely because it splits the player base too much. And with existing game modes, they don't want to turn too many of them into ranked modes because they like the idea of keeping them more fun and casual. So there's everything that was mentioned about ranked. Let me know in the comments below, what are your thoughts on all that? What do you think about ranked at the moment? How would you change it? Let me know. But for now, we jump over to something close to my heart, progression. Progression and more progression. I personally see progression as one of the most important things in any game because no matter how good the base game is, and let's be real, Apex is amazing, you still need a reason to play the game, something to do while playing it, whether it's, leveling up skins, a mastery of weapons or legends, maybe it's unlocking new badges, grinding your seasonal trackers, it's all so important. and in my opinion is one of the simplest and easiest ways to add replayability to your game. In the most recent dev panel we had, aka 1 day ago, I asked about this multiple times, and sadly they said they didn't have any of the devs that worked on that on the panel, so they couldn't answer it. And jumping back a few months to the first dev panel I was on, I asked largely the same questions because I love progression so much and want to see more of it in Apex, especially giving our seasonal trackers back. And I got largely the same answer. They said they didn't have anyone from the progression team on the dev panel, so they couldn't overly answer it, but they did expand and mention a few things. First, that they had lots and lots planned, but they couldn't say exactly what. Although they did mention that there was a lot coming to badges and they wanted to make a lot of changes with badges to make you able to show off your skills and your achievements better. I believe the words they used were they wanted to allow competitive comparison with them. For weapon mastery, I brought up the fact that while it's an amazing idea, it's been done honestly pretty badly in both different ways we've had it. And they said that there are no changes planned for this for the upcoming year. And lastly, for progression, seasonal trackers. The devs on the panel said they personally didn't know why they were removed, as it's not their areas of expertise, but they did double check for the exact ones I was talking about and said they would pass on the question to the, correct devs. That was 3 months ago though, haven't heard anything more about it, but fingers are still crossed. If any devs out there watching this, please add more progression to the game in any forms of new badges, trackers, weapon mastery, legend mastery. It's a free replayability for your game. It gives people something to grind for. All skill levels can show off their skills with the likes of seasonal trackers, whether someone's proud of being 100 kills, 1,000 kills, 10,000, or 20,000 in the season. And it's just absolutely awesome thing to have something to do. So please add them back, I'm begging. Next up, we have movement. And the first thing they said here was movement is the core and heart of the game. Ironic when, Ash has a snare, but we're moving on. They continuously mentioned and reinforced the fact that movement is a massive part of Apex, and they wanted to make movement better for everyone, especially more accessible to new players. At which point most creators brought up punch boosting, saying it was a fantastic and fun little aspect of the game, which was available to absolutely everyone that played the game and super easy to do, but nothing was said about this. And while they love movement and want to continue having movement in the game because it increases the skill ceiling, they also wanted to have counters to it so that it can balance out and be, okay for players that aren't movement players. But that they are always looking for ways to add new movement to the game because they understand that movement is fun and they want to consistently add in more fun things to the game. So for example, Ash Dash added to the game because it's super fun, and when making changes to Ash to try and balance her, they didn't overly change her dash because it's such a fun part of her kit. And this leads into what they're doing and how they're looking at adding more movement to the game. They have tested, tried, and done things based around the idea of giving every single legend in the game the same movement ability. So for example, they tested giving Ash dash to every single legend in the game, but that it just simply didn't work. It took away so much readability of the way the game was played as a whole, and also just the uniqueness of legends. As a big thing about a battle royale or a game in general is from players' silhouettes and the shapes they are, you can tell what they can do, you can predict the way they're gonna move and how they're gonna do things. But if everyone has a universal dash, for example, that changes it a lot and becomes much less doable. They mentioned that they've also tried to give certain movement abilities to each class, but it was samely large issues and didn't really work. From the way they spoke about this, it seems they're trying to do and testing things like this almost every single Tuesday, and they mentioned that every Tuesday for them is an absolute wild one, trying out these bizarre things. And they recognize that at face value on the surface, adding one universal movement to every legend in the game, or to every type of legend, it just makes perfect sense that they have tried to do this and will continue to try to do it, but it just isn't working at the moment. All right, legends or character time. Quite a bit was spoken about this. In my first dev panel, so the one a few months ago, the devs did admit that they didn't realize how much bringing out new characters brought back old players to the game, along with new players as well due to all the hype that it creates. They said it took them a lot longer than it should have to recognize this shortcoming as character releases slowed down, and expect more changes in the future with new legends and whatnot. Crypto was brought up and they said they wanted to make changes to him and make him more viable where not all his abilities were attached to his drone. Back to my first dev meeting again, and this was just after Pathfinder had received massive nerfs, and they gave reasoning for this. He ultimately got these nerfs because the devs wanted people to play other legends, and they tried to buff other legends over and over again to make them more enticing to play, but people were still playing Pathfinder because he was so fun and so strong. And while they always try and buff first and incentivize people to play new legends rather than nerfing people to push you off a current legend, they got to the point where they had to nerf Pathfinder. Since then, they kind of saw that that was a mistake and they put Pathfinder back to being super strong and buffed him again. So that was a good change by the devs, realizing that they had done something that, wasn't overall good for the fun of the game. And now Wraith time. I don't actually remember this point being spoken about, but it's written down in my notes. They said that they feel Wraith's passive is largely outdated at this point, especially with the addition of so many new legends with so many strong abilities, and rather than tweaking it or doing small changes to it, they have thought about reworking it as a whole. And finally, when given an overview of how they make changes and balance legends in the game, they mentioned that their philosophy in the past had always been entirely around balance itself, but now have shifted more to wanting to focus on the impact of their changes being fun, as well as obviously being balanced. They said that previous patches didn't always make the game feel fresh, and they wanted that feeling to happen with almost every update moving forward, whether it was a seasonal change or even a split change in the middle of a season. Now from all that legend and character stuff, we jump over to weapons. And most of the stuff here is from my original first dev meeting. They said they'd spoken to us about how they solved the issue of the bow being floor loot, so this is when it was obviously in care package, and since then it's been made floor loot, and the big issue was the ammo type, which they made sniper, so they did solve that issue and was great. But overall, they said they're very happy with the current weapon pool. There was no plans to add new weapons. That is, unless they can identify an area or a gap within the game that a new weapon could fill, but they don't currently see that. Although, one thing they did mention, or that was brought up, was an energy pistol, saying they like the idea of this, but they're not sure exactly how it would happen, whether it would be a whole new weapon, a rework of an old weapon, or whatnot. And lastly, this is something that was said and reiterated in both of my dev meetings. The goal is to make all weapons in the game viable. They don't want to have it like the old days where there were certain weapons that were pretty bad and unusable, like for example the OG Mozam or the OG P20. Now, personally, I disagree with this. I think having bad weapons in a game is a great aspect to the game. It creates so many cool and funny things you can do. For example, you know, it was always a meme to pick up the bad Mozam. It could create cool challenges. It could do so much. Plus, I think just having bad weapons is good. You don't want every single weapon in the game to be good and viable. But that's just my thoughts. Arenas, all right, Arenas time. Their new little pet project at the moment, as we did just get the big new 1v1 arena update. But for Arenas in general, a few things were said. First off, they said they plan on keeping Arenas as a 3-round mode, mentioning that they were happy with the flow and speed of the current mode for a casual experience, and that having a shorter mode meant that the whole game mode was a lot more healthy with less people quitting and leaving, because even if there was, you know, a more lopsided matchup, it was only a couple of rounds, so you still wouldn't leave and ruin the whole game. They did mention they know this removes the drama or storyline or hype from longer games, but overall thought this was the better way to go about it. As for 1v1 Arenas, they spoke a bit how they made the spawns, wanting people to have different options and which ways to go off spawn, the highlight at the start so that people know where each other are, the reactive changes they've made to this to try and make it better. And of course, one of the biggest issues with 1v1 Arenas, the time in between matchups. They said they know a lot of people have had issues with this, and it's something they're always monitoring and trying to, you know, consistently work on. But it's not something that's super easy, because if they decrease the time between matchups too much, what they were finding is the way the system would work is it would match people up with the same people over and over, and they wouldn't get a good variety of versing different people in the lobby, which makes sense, as you would have to wait for people to be available and their games to finish, and not everyone's games take the same amount of time. The next topic that was brought up is meta and the overall meta of Apex and the way that they work around it and work with it. First up, the Diio. The Diio, the Diio, and the Diio. They know the Diio is OP, they know it's insane, and it's an extremely soft and sore spot for them, as they continuously brought it up and continuously mentioned and literally said that it is. They said the gun had been underused for a very, very long time, and they wanted to bring it up to be used a lot, and they thought what they'd done was really cool ways into doing it, but they recognize that it is extremely OP and extremely overtuned, especially with the way it interacts with other legends. So for example, Ballistic. They pushed the hotfix for it recently, and they're hoping that makes a significant impact on it, but they are willing to, you know, keep monitoring that and make more changes as required. And again, they did mention they know that Ballistic makes the weapon so much more stronger, and maybe that is something they'll look into as well. When creating metas and making changes to the game, they mentioned that they always want to buff legends first and nerf last, as their whole goal or philosophy is to incentivize people to play other legends by buffing them and making them more enticing or fun, and not to nerf legends to pull you away from them. When making changes though, there's two main ways they do it. Obviously it's with planning, so you know, they work out and pre-plan seasons in advance, and then it's reactionary, hot fixes and changes when things are overtuned or undertuned. So for example, as Sparrow came out this season and he's a bow user, marksman type of, you know, bounty hunter kind of vibes, their goal was to focus on marksman weapons, as they felt these weapons best suited that kind of vibe, and they'd like to keep everything within the certain categories of each other. And of course, it also coincided with the fact that the bow was coming back to floor loot and that the gold sniper stock was being added to the game, so it all fit well and nicely together. And when making changes, whether it's before a season or it's reactionary after a season has started, they take into account absolutely everything you can think of. They mentioned all the stats from, you know, pick rate overall, pick rate at certain ranks, win percentage of games when using this or using that, fights won from higher level players compared to lower level players, especially when they're versing each other, and then the overall consensus of the way the community is feeling and how they're responding and what they're saying. Next up, we have ALGS, and there was only a couple of questions about this, and it was super short. Largely, it was based around the idea of, is there any way or any plans to integrate ALGS more into the game itself? So for example, think of the way Fortnite does it with their in-game tournaments, their in-game cash cups and stuff like that. And the answer was no, there's no plans for that in the immediate future, but they did mention they're actively looking at how to make ranked more like ALGS. They want to bridge the gap that there is between them. This was from the first dev panel, so I'm not exactly sure 100% what it means because I don't remember that far back, but I have a quote written down that they said. The example they gave was they wanted to bridge the gap by quote unquote, even if it means creating similar watchable moments in game. And finally, other stuff that largely just doesn't fit under a massive category or only very small amounts of stuff was said about. First up, we have the ping system. The devs have mentioned they're looking at ways to boost up and make the ping system better, especially for dead teammates. So for example, if you're dead, you'd be able to ping stuff on the map, ping crafters, etc. Next up, the devs said they absolutely love the idea of being able to jump into the firing range while you're queued up waiting for games to start, but this isn't easy to do and they have other priorities that are much more important at the moment, but maybe something they come back to in the future. Next, the potential for new grenades or throwables coming into the game. They said they have prototyped lots of different types for this, but there is a fine line between throwables and survivable items. And genuinely, it's really hard to make a throwable that can be utilized like a grenade and shouldn't just be a new Legend's ability instead. Saying that looking back at old Legend's abilities like Revenant, for example, where he could throw a silence was way too strong, at which point I brought up in the chat that we have an aimbot ability on a certain Legend that can silence you and stop you from moving, to which all the other creators upvoted my comments and sadly was not noticed by the devs. Along with the old example of Revenant though, they also brought up old Seer and saying that how these abilities were super strong and it was hard to add them as a throwable in the game. There was a question asked about the firing range and if we could have more customization to it. So for example, we could change the dummies into certain Legends we wanted so that we could practice, fighting and shooting against certain hitboxes. This was received quite well, but once again, the priority list they have was brought up. Now, white backpacks in Apex. A lot of people think they're useless and everyone should spawn with them to start with, or they should be removed from the game in total, but the devs said they like having them in the game as it heavily affects things like your loot paths and the way you're meant to loot. The option to add a backpack upgraded to the crafter was brought up and they said they liked that idea, but it's been a few months since that was brought up and nothing's happened, so maybe they didn't like it that much, who knows? Off the top of my head on my notes, that's largely everything that was spoken about, but I'm sure I've forgotten some things, or if you guys want clarification on certain things, feel free to pop a comment down in the comments below. I don't know where else you put the comment, but yeah, and I'll try and get to it and answer it and have a conversation about it. I've tried to do this video largely as me just stating everything that was spoken about and not giving my thoughts on it as well, so if you guys would like to know my thoughts, any of the changes or the not changes, let me know in the comments below and I can try and give you my thoughts on them as well. Anyway, as always, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for being awesome. Thank you for being amazing. And I'll see you guys again soon. Actually, no, wait up. Big thank you to the devs as well. Having this interaction and ability to talk to them and get answers and questions on certain things and understand how things are happening within the game itself is really, really cool. I hope more things like this happens in the future. And it's great that they let me in, the #1 complainer on Twitter. So big pog. Thank you again, guys.